My name is Claire Whitmore, and I was 17 years old when my grandmother died on a Sunday morning in October. By Tuesday, my father and his brother had already called a realtor. By Thursday, they had divided her furniture between 2 trucks parked in her driveway. Her china, her quilts, the writing desk she had kept by the window for 40 years, all of it tagged and sorted like items at an estate sale before we had even chosen the flowers for her casket. I stood in her living room that Thursday afternoon and watched my Uncle Dale carry out the wingback chair she used to read in. The one with the worn armrest on the right side where she always rested her hand. I said nothing, not because I had nothing to say, but because 3 weeks earlier, my grandmother had sat across from me at her kitchen table and told me something I was still learning to understand. She said, and I remember every word, "Everything that matters already has your name on it, Claire. You just have to be old enough to use it." I was 17. I thought she was being sentimental. She was not being sentimental. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time below. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now let me take you back 5 years, to the summer I turned 12, and show you exactly how my grandmother built a wall around everything she loved. Quietly, carefully, one legal document at a time. My grandmother's name was Dorothy Whitmore. She lived in the same white farmhouse in Clover Ridge for 51 years. The house sat at the end of a gravel road, surrounded by old oak trees that dropped acorns on the roof every fall. The porch wrapped around 2 sides. The screen door had a spring that snapped it shut with a sound I heard in my sleep for years after. The summer I turned 12, my mother drove me out to Clover Ridge for 2 weeks while she dealt with something she called a family situation that I was too young to ask about. She dropped me at the end of the gravel road with a duffel bag and drove away. My grandmother was already on the porch waiting. She handed me a glass of lemonade before I reached the steps. "You look like you need a project," she said. That was how she talked. No fuss, no extra words. The house smelled like cedar and old paper, and something sweet I eventually figured out was the dried lavender she kept in small bundles above every doorframe. The floors were wide pine boards that shifted and creaked differently depending on the weather. I learned within the first few days that the 3rd step on the staircase had a hollow sound if you stepped on the left side. Dorothy laughed when I pointed it out. "You're a noticer," she said. "Good." Noticers are hard to fool. We spent those 2 weeks doing what she called keeping the house honest. We recaulked the bathroom tiles. We painted the porch floorboards a deep gray she had chosen from a sample card she'd kept in her junk drawer for 2 years. We replaced the rusted hooks in the mudroom and fixed the latch on the cellar door that had never quite caught right. She showed me everything slowly. She never did a job while I watched. She did it beside me. At lunch we ate at the kitchen table she had bought with her first paycheck from her first job, a detail she mentioned only once, but that I never forgot. We had cold ham sandwiches and sweet tea, and she told me stories about her own mother, a woman who had owned a piece of land in Tennessee at a time when people told her she couldn't, who kept every deed and title and tax record in a fireproof lockbox under the bed, who said that a woman's name on a piece of paper was worth more than any promise made out loud. A name on paper, Dorothy told me, is the only promise that holds. I wrote it down that night in the small notebook I kept in my back pocket. I underlined it. I thought it was wisdom in the abstract. The kind of thing grandmothers say. It was instructions. On my last night that summer, Dorothy and I sat on the porch after dark listening to the tree frogs. She had a glass of sweet tea. I had pulled my knees up to my chest the way I always did when I wanted a conversation to last longer. She looked out at the oak trees for a while before she spoke. "This house is going to belong to somebody who earned it," she said, "not somebody who waited for it." I asked what she meant. She looked at me sideways with that expression she had, calm and certain, like someone who had already made every decision and was simply waiting for time to catch up. "You'll understand when you need to," she said. She was right about that too. Back home in Hargrove, our house was fine the way a waiting room is fine. Functional, neutral, nothing on the walls that meant anything. My father ran a contracting business from the spare bedroom and spent most evenings on the phone. My mother kept everything organized and asked very few questions. My younger sister Brooke had the bigger bedroom and a brand new laptop for her birthday that year. I had the same desk I did since 5th grade. At dinner that fall, my father mentioned Dorothy's house for the first time. He did it carefully, the way he always introduced things he had already decided. He called it the Clover Ridge property, not Grandma's house. The property. Taxes on that place don't pay themselves, he said, and she's not getting any younger. She just turned 74, I said. My father nodded like I had agreed with him. My Uncle Dale was there that night. He nodded too. He was a real estate agent, and he had the habit of looking at rooms like he was calculating their square footage. Values out that way have gone up considerably, Dale said. Farmhouse on that acreage. She's sitting on something. Nobody asked me what I thought. I cleared the plates. I washed the glasses. I thought about the porch with the gray floorboards and the screen door that snapped shut and the kitchen table she'd bought with her first paycheck. I thought about the way they said she's sitting on something. Like Dorothy was an obstacle between them and a number. I kept that thought very quietly in the back of my mind, and I kept noticing. Dorothy's health started declining when I was 15, nothing dramatic at first, slower on the stairs, tired after lunch. A doctor's appointment that turned into 3. By spring, she had a diagnosis that she told me herself on the phone, directly, without softening it, because she said I deserved the real information. I visited every weekend that I could manage. Bus to the county road, 2-mile walk up the gravel drive every Saturday morning. Dorothy always had the coffee on before I arrived. My father visited 4 times in 8 months. My Uncle Dale came twice. Both times he brought a manila folder. One Saturday in early fall I arrived to find Dale's car in the driveway. I could hear them in the kitchen before I opened the screen door. I stopped on the porch. The window was cracked. Dale's voice smooth, reasonable, the voice he used with sellers. Dorothy, a listing at the right price moves in 2 weeks in this market. You'd have cash, you'd have options, you wouldn't have to worry about the upkeep. Dorothy's voice flat, patient, the voice she used when she was done with something. I don't worry about the upkeep, Dale. A pause, then Dale, quieter. The boys could use the equity. Times have been tight. Dorothy said nothing for a moment. Then she said, Claire keeps this house honest. That's not nothing. I sat down on the top porch step. I looked at the oak trees. I was 15 years old and I had no money and no lawyer and no way to stop anything. But I had heard my name, and I had heard her say it like it meant something specific. Dorothy passed on a Sunday morning in October, 16 months later. I was in the middle of a shift at the diner where I worked weekends when my phone lit up with my mother's name. I walked to the parking lot and stood between 2 cars in the cold and listened, and then stood there for a while longer after I hung up. The funeral was on a Wednesday. The smell of old wood and chrysanthemums. Half the county came through, neighbors, women from her church, people she had helped across 40 years who stood in line to say so. I sat in the front row and held the small notebook from that summer when I was 12. The one with the underlined sentence. By the time I got back from the burial, the trucks were already being arranged. My father and Dale had made a plan. Dorothy's house would go to market within 60 days. The furniture would be divided now. The savings would be split between the 2 brothers. It was, my father said at the kitchen table that evening, the practical thing. Practical. That was the word they used for everything that used to be love. I said nothing. I helped carry boxes. I labeled things when they asked me to. I watched Dale measure the front room with a tape measure while my grandmother's reading glasses were still on the side table. That evening I drove to Clover Ridge alone, sat on the porch in the dark, listened to the tree frogs. In my jacket pocket was the small notebook, and a thought I couldn't shake. She had said my name like it meant something specific. I was going to find out what. 2 days after the funeral, I went looking, not in the obvious places. My father had already been through Dorothy's desk and her filing cabinet in the spare room. He had found the basic documents, the will, the bank statements, the utility accounts. He had found what he expected to find. He had not found what she didn't want him to find. I knew Dorothy. I knew she was a noticer. And I knew that a woman who kept dried lavender above every doorframe and a paint sample in her junk drawer for 2 years did not leave the things that mattered in obvious places. I spent that Saturday going through the house slowly. The cellar, the attic crawl space, the back of every closet, inside the lining of the old cedar chest. Behind the bottom drawer of her bedroom dresser, pulled all the way out, taped flat against the back panel, I found an envelope. My name on the front, her handwriting. Careful and slanted the way she always wrote. Inside, a folded letter, and a business card. The letter was 3 paragraphs. I read it 4 times on the floor of her bedroom. She wrote that she had been planning this since I was 12, that she had spent that summer watching me and deciding, that she had met with an attorney the following January, that everything she owned, the house, the land, the savings account she had built over 40 years, had been placed into an irrevocable trust 18 months after my visit. That my name was the only name on it, that the deed to the property had been recorded under the trust at the county recorder's office. that it had never been in her personal estate, that it could not be inherited by her sons because legally it was never hers to pass down, it had already passed. She wrote, "I knew they would move fast. I needed you to be old enough to receive it before they figured out it was already gone." The business card was cream-colored, simple type, James Hadley, estate and trust attorney. And below that, in small print, Whitmore Family Irrevocable Trust. I sat on the floor of her bedroom for a long time. The house was quiet. The oak trees moved outside the window. The third step on the staircase had its hollow sound when the wind shifted the frame. I put the card in my jacket pocket next to the notebook. I did not call the number that night. I needed to be still first. 3 days later, James Hadley called me. I was in the parking lot of my school when an unknown local number appeared. His voice was measured and unhurried. "Claire, I was your grandmother's attorney. I've been waiting to hear from you. We need to speak before your family moves forward with any property transactions. There's a timeline we need to discuss." We met that Saturday at his office downtown. Clean desk, 2 chairs, a window that looked onto the street. He opened a file and set 3 documents in front of me. "Your grandmother established this trust 5 years ago," he said. "At that time, she transferred the Clover Ridge property and her primary savings account into the trust. The deed was recorded under the trust name at the county recorder's office. The property has not been in Dorothy Whitmore's personal name since then. It did not enter her estate when she died. Your father and uncle have no legal claim to it." I looked at the document. My name, sole beneficiary, the address of the farmhouse at the end of the gravel road. "They don't know this exists," I said. "No, your grandmother was specific about that. She said if they knew, they'd find a way around it before you were old enough to stop them." I looked at him. "How do I receive it?" "You're 17. You'll be 18 in 4 months. The moment you turn 18, you can formally accept your role as successor beneficiary and assume control of the trust. I file a lease pendens at the county recorder's office that same morning, a public notice of legal interest, and from that moment, no transaction can be recorded against the property without your consent. What happens if they try to sell before I turn 18? He set down his pen. If they attempt to file a deed of transfer, the county recorder will find a conflict in the chain of title. The property has been held in trust for 5 years. A deed from your father or uncle contradicts recorded history. It will be flagged. Can they create problems even if they can't sell?" He nodded carefully. "If your uncle files an affidavit of heirship claiming the property passed outside the trust, he could create what's called a cloud on title. It wouldn't give him ownership, but it could tie the property in litigation for a year or more. That's why we move the moment you turn 18, not a day later." "For months," I said. He nodded. "For months." I drove home. My father was in the kitchen going over a printout from a real estate website, comparable sales in Clover Ridge. He had circled 3 listings in pen. He looked up and smiled. "Dale thinks we can list by January," he said. "Good time to catch the spring buyers." I set my keys on the counter. "Sounds like a plan," I said. He nodded, satisfied. He turned back to his printout. I went upstairs. I closed my door. I sat on my bed and looked at the ceiling. Have you ever had to stay completely still while everything inside you wanted to move? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. 4 months. I could do 4 months. That night my sister Brooke knocked on my door. She was in pajamas with her hair still damp. She sat on the edge of my bed and picked at a loose thread on my comforter. "Dad and Uncle Dale keep talking about Grandma's house," she said, "every night after dinner. I can hear them from my room." I looked at her. "They sound excited," she said, "like they already decided something." She paused. "Did Grandma leave you anything?" I kept my face even. "She left me some things to figure out," I said. Brooke looked at me for a moment. Then she nodded slowly like she understood more than she let on. She went back to her room. I sat in the dark for a long time, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do, because this is the part where everything starts to turn. 2 weeks before my 18th birthday, Dale made his move. He came to the house on a Thursday evening with a folder and a notary stamp and the kind of careful smile he wore when he was closing something. He sat at the kitchen table with my father and called me in from the living room. "Claire," he said, "we need to get some paperwork sorted before we can list the property. Since you were close to your grandmother, we want to make sure you're included." He slid a document across the table. It was a deed of release. My signature would confirm that I held no personal interest in the Clover Ridge property and that I consented to its transfer and sale. He had a pen ready. I picked up the document. I read it. I set it down. "I'll need to look this over," I said. Dale smiled. "It's straightforward, Claire, standard language, just a formality." That word, Formality. The word people use when they want you to stop reading. I understand, I said. I just want to read it carefully. My father put his hand on my arm. Gently, the way he did when he wanted something to feel like support instead of pressure. We're all in this together, he said. Family. I looked at him. I'll have an answer by the weekend, I said. I took the document upstairs. I photographed every page. I texted the images to James Hadley with 2 words. They're pushing. His reply came in 6 minutes. Expected. Don't sign anything. 14 days. 14 days. I went back downstairs. Dale was still at the table. I appreciate you including me, I said. I'll let you know. He nodded. He gathered his folder. He was already on his phone before he reached the front door. That night I drove to Clover Ridge for the last time before my birthday. The gravel road was dark. The oaks were bare now, their branches making patterns against the sky. I parked where I always parked and walked up to the porch and sat in the chair closest to the door, the one that had always been Dorothy's. The house smelled like cedar and cold air. The lavender bundles above the doorframes had faded, but they were still there, still holding their shape. I opened the letter on my phone, the photo I had taken of Dorothy's handwriting the day I found it. I read it again. I cried, not loudly, not falling apart. Just the quiet kind of crying that comes when you feel the weight of how much someone loved you and how much you wish they were still here to see it land. I wished my father had been the kind of man who drove out on Saturdays to keep the house honest instead of calculating its listing price. I wished he had asked me even once what Dorothy meant to me instead of assuming I would sign what he put in front of me. I wished I didn't need a trust document and a county filing to protect myself from my own family. But wishes don't get recorded at the county clerk's office. Deeds do. I wiped my face. I locked the porch door. I drove home through the empty roads and went to bed and set my alarm for 11:45. In 12 days, I would turn 18. In 13, James Hadley would file. The night before my birthday, 11:47 p.m., my father and mother were asleep. Brooke's light had gone off an hour ago. The house was completely still. I sat at my desk with my laptop open and the acceptance documents pulled up. James Hadley appeared on the video call at 11:50, reading glasses, a desk lamp. The same measured calm he carried in every conversation. Ready? He asked. Ready? He walked me through the document one final time, precise and unhurried. At midnight you become a legal adult, he said. You sign the acceptance of successor beneficiary form and you formally receive everything your grandmother placed in trust for you. From that moment, all decisions regarding the Whitmore family irrevocable trust run through you. The property, the savings account, everything, and tomorrow morning. I am at the county recorder's office when they open at 8. I file the lease pendens, public notice of active legal interest. From that moment, nothing can be recorded against the Clover Ridge property without triggering a conflict review, and if Dale has already filed something, it will be returned. The chain of title shows the trust recorded 5 years ago. Any deed from your father or uncle contradicts the recorded history. The clerk flags it. It goes nowhere. I looked at the document on my screen. My name, sole beneficiary, Dorothy Whitmore's name above mine, the address of the house at the end of the